The problem with being a late-night radio host in a town called Quiet Cove is that the name is a dare, a challenge. The universe says, here is a sleepy little fishing town with exactly one stoplight and a diner that closes at 9 p.m. Let's see if you can find something interesting to talk about for 4 hours. For 3 years, my answer was no. My show, The Midnight Hour with Leo Vance, was less a beacon of insightful conversation and more a cozy, humming appliance. People called in about lost cats, unusually large turnips they'd grown in their gardens, and once a very passionate diatribe about the town's decision to paint the lighthouse a disrespectful shade of beige. I was the king of comfy, uninteresting radio. I had the voice for it, a sort of warm, low rumble that was perfect for telling people to have a pleasant tomorrow. I was the auditory equivalent of a weighted blanket. And I was, to be perfectly honest, more than a little lonely. My world was the size of a soundproof booth. I had a plant named Fred, who was drooping with the silent solidarity of a fellow captive, and a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Host." That was my life. But then, on a Tuesday night in October, God called. Now, I've heard some weird things on the hotline. A man who was convinced his cat was a reincarnated Egyptian pharaoh. A woman who wanted me to dedicate a song to her prize-winning petunias. But this was different. The call came in at 12:15 a.m. during a particularly low point in my show, when I was reading the ingredients off a box of mac and cheese, because I had nothing else. The phone line buzzed. I punched the button with the enthusiasm of a man being thrown a life raft. "You're on the air with Leo, the ear you can trust," I said, my voice dripping with false cheer. "What's on your mind tonight?" There was a long silence, then a voice. It was immense. I know that sounds like a cliché, but there's no other word for it. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was a deep, quiet hum that felt like it was vibrating in the fillings of my teeth. It was the sound a galaxy might make if it were purring. "Leo," the voice said. It was just my name. But it felt like the entire history of the universe was packed into those 3 letters. Yes?" I said, my own voice sounding incredibly small and squeaky by comparison. "Can I get your name, caller?" "I am." The voice paused, and the silence was so profound I could hear the static from a distant star. "What you might call God." I almost laughed. My first instinct was to say, "Yeah, and I'm Santa Claus. What's your real name, buddy?" But I didn't. The feeling in the booth was too strange, too heavy. It was like the air had thickened. "Right," I said, trying to regain my professional composure. "Well, God, I'm sure you have a lot on your plate. The whole, divine plan and all. What can I do for you tonight?" "I'm tired, Leo." And there was a weariness in it that was older than mountains. And lonely. "I am considering retirement." I leaned back in my squeaky office chair. Retirement? God was retiring? I almost choked on my spit. Retirement? From everything? Who takes over? Is there a vice god? Do you have a board of directors? A sound that could have been a sigh, or the shifting of tectonic plates echoed down the line. It is less a job and more an awareness, a constant feeling of everything at once. It's exhausting, Leo. For eons I have been the quiet center of it all, and it is a very lonely place to be. Tonight, I heard your voice, and I found a kind of peace. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't. I was quiet, and God apparently loved it. "Thank you for your silence, Leo," the voice murmured. It is the most honest thing I have heard in millennia. Most people only talk to me when they want something. And just like that, the call ended. The line went dead. I sat there staring at the blinking console, my mind a complete blank. I thought it was a prank. A really, really good one. Maybe some sound engineer from a big city station was messing with me. But when I replayed the audio, the voice was there, but it seemed to warp the very tape, making the recording hiss with a strange energy. The next night, at 12:15 a.m. on the dot, the phone buzzed again. It was him. And so it began. Every night for a year.
God would call me. He would always say, "Leo, it is I," which I found hilarious. "It is I," I'd repeat back, a goofy grin on my face. "What's the news from the cosmos?" To my listeners, the show must have seemed very strange. 1 minute, Leo is talking about the weather. The next, he's having a long, rambling, silent pause. They couldn't hear him. To them, it just looked like I was nodding off. But we talked about everything. And I mean everything, except faith. He was sick of talking about faith. We talked about the design flaws of the platypus. We debated whether a hot dog was a sandwich. He told me the story of a nebula that looked exactly like a bunny rabbit. Then I told him about the time I accidentally dyed all my underwear pink in the wash. He, the creator of all things, found my tale of laundry-related woe to be profoundly human and deeply entertaining. I, in turn, found his description of a supernova to be beautiful. He made it sound like a song. And I fell in love with his voice. It was a slow, creeping thing. It started with me looking forward to 12:15 a.m. with an embarrassing amount of glee. Then I'd find myself smiling when I heard his first word. Soon, I was telling my plant Fred, "Fred, he's calling tonight. Isn't that great?" Fred, the drama queen, just drooped a little more. He, in turn, fell in love with my silences. He told me once, "Your quiet is like a soft, warm room in the middle of a never-ending storm. I feel like I can rest there, Leo. Like I can just be." One night, after a particularly long silence where I was just listening to him breathe. Did God breathe? Apparently, yes. I worked up the courage to say something utterly stupid. "So, are you like a handsome God? Or is it more of a spectral, all-encompassing light kind of deal?" He was quiet for a moment, and I thought I had offended the Supreme Being. Then he laughed. It was a marvelous sound, like the crashing of waves on a beach made of crystal. "When you are eternal, Leo, appearances become a matter of convenience. For you, I would be whatever you desired." My heart, the traitor, did a little flip-flop in my chest. "Right, well, I'll put in my request form," I joked, trying to cover my fluster. "Just for the record, I'm a fan of the scruffy, I've been up for 3 days building a universe look." Little did I know how prophetic my stupid joke would be. The year was magical. It was ridiculous. It was the most real thing in my life. I'd go home to my sad little apartment, pet my cat. Yes, I got a cat. I named him Moses. And count the hours until my show. I was in love with a voice on the phone. I was in love with God. It was insane. It was wonderful. It was my secret. And then, on the 365th night, everything changed. His voice sounded different. It had an edge to it, a finality. "Leo," he said, and my name sounded like a prayer. "Hey, you," I said, forcing a cheerfulness I didn't feel. "Feeling okay? You sound a little intense." "I have made my decision," he said. "I am giving it up. The awareness, the weight, all of it. My blood ran cold.
The warmth in the booth vanished, replaced by a sudden chill. Giving it up? What does that even mean? You can't just resign. Who's going to keep the sun turning on? Who's going to be the cosmic HR department for all the angels? I will be human, Leo, he said, and his voice was quieter now, softer. I am coming to you. My brain short-circuited. He was becoming human? For me? Wait, I stammered. That's a lot of pressure. What about the whole grand design thing? The duck-billed platypus was a masterpiece. You can't just abandon your creation. I have set things in motion, Leo. The world will be fine, he said, with a sigh that sounded almost nervous. But there is a condition. There's always a condition, I muttered, feeling panic start to claw at my throat. What is it? I have to solve 3 riddles? Fight a hydra? I'm very out of shape, God. You should know that. You made me. Tomorrow, I will be born, he continued, ignoring my panic. I will be a man, somewhere in this town. I will have a new name, new memories, a new life. I will know nothing of who I was. You must find me before midnight, Leo. My mouth went dry. Find you? In Quiet Cove? There are like 2,000 people here. How am I supposed to find you? Do I just walk around yelling, "Hey, new guy, are you the Almighty?" You must find me before the clock strikes 12, he repeated, his voice growing faint. Or I will forget everything. I will forget my life before. I will forget our talks. I will forget you. Find me, Leo. The line went dead. I was left alone in my silent booth, staring at the clock. It was 12:59 a.m. I had less than 24 hours. I didn't sleep. How could I? I paced my apartment, muttering to myself like a maniac. I have to find God in Quiet Cove. He's a newborn adult with no memories, and I have to be his... what? His tour guide? His boyfriend? His cosmic babysitter? A fresh wave of dread washed over me. I couldn't just walk up to someone and say, "Hi, you don't know me, but you used to be God and I'm your radio crush?" I'd be arrested. Quietly, so as not to upset the tourists, but arrested nonetheless. The next morning, I started my search. I made a list. A tiny man in a tweed jacket playing a board game? Looked like a professor, not a deity. I needed signs, omens, miracles. I went to the diner. The coffee tasted like it usually did. Burnt. Not a miracle, just bad brewing. I went to the beach. The waves crashed, the seagulls squawked. Nothing looked newly created. It all looked like it had been there for a while. I was growing desperate. My eyes were wild. I was probably scaring people. I was in line at the grocery store, scrutinizing a man who seemed too serene as he bought a can of tuna. He caught me staring. "Can I help you?" he asked, a little nervously. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I just thought I knew you." He looked at me like I was a lost puppy and hurried away. The hours ticked by. 10 a.m., no luck. 2 p.m., nothing. I had a mental image of God. My God. The voice I'd fallen in love with, wandering around town with a completely blank mind, forgetting the sound of my voice, forgetting our beautiful silences. The thought made my chest ache. By 6 p.m., I was a wreck. I was sitting on a bench in the town square, watching the world go by, and I'd never felt more powerless. I was looking for a man who looked like he had just been made. But he could look like anyone. He could be anyone. Then a stray thought popped into my head. a memory from one of our conversations. He'd said, "For you, I would be whatever you desired." And I, in my infinite wisdom, had said, "I'm a fan of the scruffy, I've been up for 3 days building a universe look." My head snapped up. I scanned the square. There was a man. He was sitting by the town fountain, looking completely and utterly lost. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. His hair was a dark, messy tangle, like he'd just woken up from a nap that had lasted for a very long time. And he had dark circles under his eyes.
The kind you get from staying up for 3 days building a universe. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just sitting there, staring at the water, looking tired and scared. And very, very human. I knew it. I just knew it. I was in love with his voice, but it was his silence that drew me. And here he was, a man who had no voice, no memory, just a profound, beautiful silence surrounding him like a blanket. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I walked over to him, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. He looked up as I approached. His eyes were the most incredible shade of gray. They looked empty, but also like they were waiting for something. For someone. "Hi," I said, my voice cracking. I cleared my throat. "I'm Leo."
You look like you could use a friend. He stared at me for a long moment. Then a smile, tentative and confused, spread across his face. I don't know who I am," he said, his voice a little rough, a little lost. It wasn't the voice I knew, but it was his. I woke up this morning and I felt like I was supposed to be here, in this town, and that I was waiting for something, or someone. My throat tightened. I sat down next to him on the edge of the fountain. "I think you were waiting for me." He looked at me, and his eyes, though they didn't know me, seemed to see me. "Your voice," he whispered. "I feel like I've heard your voice before. In a dream. You were telling me about a pink laundry incident." Tears welled up in my eyes. He remembered. On some level, he remembered me. And the only thing he could recall was the story about my underwear?
God was a romantic.
"That's a long story," I said, a watery laugh escaping me. "Come on, let's go get some terrible coffee." As the church bells in the square began to chime midnight, he reached over and took my hand. His fingers intertwined with mine.
And when the final bell echoed into the night, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Leo." He didn't look like the Almighty anymore. He just looked like a guy who needed a hot meal, a warm bed, and someone to tell him everything was going to be okay. He didn't remember his old name, so we gave him one of his own. So what if I don't have the cosmic CEO of everything on the line anymore? I have the guy. He's a little clumsy, he snores, and he's baffled by the concept of a microwave. But he's all mine. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and we're lying in the dark,
I'll just be still, and he'll say, "I love your silence, Leo. It's where I can finally rest." And I know he's not remembering a past life. He's just telling me he loves me. And that's all the miracle I'll ever need. We're just two ordinary people, holding hands on a bench in a quiet coastal town. And that's our happy ever after. My show's even got a new name, The Midnight Hour with Leo and Eli. People still call about their petunias and lost cats, but now I have the best co-host in the universe. And for a man who was once the world's okayest host, it's a pretty great gig.
He hadn't spoken in months. His voice was gone, taken by hunters. But he stood beside me on that beach facing his own mother's army, and he opened his mouth. What came out wasn't words at first, just a note, broken, fighting its way back. And then, I renounce my exile. I renounce my people. I renounce the sea itself. I choose him. I choose land. I choose mortality. His mother screamed. The light exploded. And when it faded, his tail was gone. He had legs. And he was looking at me like I was the only thing he'd traded the entire ocean for.